There used to be freedom here, but we lost it. Somewhere between the expectations and disappointments, the truths and counter truths. There used to be a sense of presence, of capability, of compassion, of knowledge, of understanding. While trying to protect it, to find it, to create it, to structure it, to control it, to tend to it, we lost it. Perhaps we left it somewhere when we went on vacation, or put it somewhere for safekeeping and then forgot where it was. Perhaps we have been looking ever since.
Beautiful. It's great to have you on set, Michael.
Thank you.
Welcome to another episode of the Kenyan Poets Podcast. I am joined by a fellow poet and a friend that I've known for quite a number of years. His name is Michael Onsando. He describes himself as a reader who writes. And I think in the last podcast, I had this book on set. It's called, yes, I had this book on set. It's called The Perilous Journey to Beyond My Nose. And I am excited because he is the author of that book, and I was really hoping that we'd have you next on the podcast, and here you are. Now, and we'll be discussing all about, this book because it's fresh off the press, but also to talk about your journey into poetry as well as the other books that you have written. Now, and before we begin, I'd just like to mention that this podcast has been made possible by the support of Unique Kenya. Great. So, Michael, as we start, tell us about. I'm curious about the title. You know, they say never judge a book by its cover, but we can judge by its title, probably. So I think we'll begin with that. What informed the title, The Perilous Journey to Beyond My Nose?
Okay, cool. Let's start there. So, you said never judge a book by its cover, but I feel like this book should particularly be judged by its cover.
And we can start by.
So let me misdirect your question. I'll get to the title, but let me start with the cover. So this cover was done by a guy called Boniface Minor. It's an oil on canvas. And it's called Self-Reflections.
Okay.
That's the name of the cover of the painting. And the funny thing is, Boniface Minor, when we first talked to him about getting him to work on this book, I was given a bunch of artworks to see which one do I think is best, and I chose one, and I was like, this is what I think is perfect. And Bonnie hadn't read the book. So I pick my artwork, we'll start laying it out, start figuring it out, and then 3 days to press, Bonnie calls us, and he's like, guys, you have the wrong cover. So he sends us this artwork, and he's like, I've read the book, and this is what you have to do. This is what you need to have on the cover. What you have on the cover will not do the book justice. And so for me, it's a beautiful story because even the cover itself is also the story of the book. And to go to the title, The Perilous Journey to Beyond My Nose, it just kind of happened one day. When you write a book like this, people wonder, how does it take years to write 200 pages of work? It's like, what's going on? But you kind of live inside that space for a while. And I was thinking, what do I want to call the book? What do I want to call the book? And I'm always fascinated by long titles, something quite unlike myself. My blog is called The Square Root of Zero. I think the other book had a short title just called Time. But in general, I really like titles that do the work of you don't have to ask me what the book is about. After I've read the title, you don't have to ask. The book is about this.
Yes.
So one day I was playing with the idea of perilous journey, perilous journey, perilous journey, because it's everywhere, right? You see that phrasing is everywhere, the perilous journey, the perilous journey. And then this other phrase that's also everywhere just clicked into place there, to beyond my nose, right? Because that's not very far. It's not very far. And so that's how that happened. I liked it and I put it there. And I called my mom and actually told her, I'm going to call my book this. And she laughed. And when my mom laughed at the title, I was like, yes, this is
I have
this
gotten
is the right
it
title,
right.
right? Because it immediately, I think, kind of hooks and kind of gets that. Because I've been known to describe the books I write as curiosity traps. Once you're curious about it, that's it. I got you. Like once you're curious and you start reading a few pages,
Oh yes.
you're not turning back.
I think that was the hook because I was like, "What is this?" And I think also the artwork itself, and it's good that you've talked about that because I find the artwork really haunting. And I was going to ask you what was the artist Boniface. What did he have in mind? Because it looks it looks quite haunting,
Yeah.
the image itself. And I think it's his interpretation of the poetry that he read in your collection.
No.
Yeah.
It's a painting he had done
Oh,
already.
okay.
That then when he was after he read the book, he was like, "This painting reflects more than the one you picked."
Than
So
the one that you had
he did
picked.
specifically paint for me.
Okay.
I couldn't afford to get him to do that.
I was going to ask you, where's the money? Where did the money come from?
He
Yeah.
was gracious enough to give me a better rate to like pick through his existing works and lay that one of those out on my book. I can't
Okay.
tell you what was on his mind.
Yeah.
Only the artist knows what's on the artist's mind at the time. But I do agree. I was really struck. Like when he sent it, like think about this is a guy who's sending this thing 3 days to print. All very like, we cannot just kick it out. Like, what do you mean? We're not gonna do this. Like, why?
Yeah.
But when I saw it, and when I think when the team saw it as well, everyone was like, actually, no, this guy has made sense, and we liked it, and I agree. There was something about the hauntingness, and like the two things looking at each other, and one in the shade, one in the light, and the purples and the oranges, the reds. It's just
It's a very beautiful cover. And just to go into the process, I think you mentioned it's a 200 page book. How long did it take you to write?
took me about 2 years. So
Okay.
I wrote this book, I want to say 2015, 2016. And then since then, it's just been the journey of like trying to figure out how to get it out. But it took me about 2 years and a bit of writing, and then about a year and a bit of then editing. And then Rosie spent another year plus just trying to come up with the illustrations. So Rosie Olang, so Bonnie Miner does the cover, Rosie Olang does everything else between the covers. And she does a brilliant job. Like, I don't think I've ever worked with someone so conscientious and like deliberate about like how she's doing and how she's interpreting. Like it's an artist who went through the trouble to like read stuff and like edit it and like be like, actually what you want to do here is use this image. Some of the stuff, like one of my favorite illustrations in here is there's one, I don't know if I can find it. That's the hold music in my head, guys. There's one for Splash, and it's really beautiful because like when I wrote it, so what I did is I write the poetry, and if you remember, I'm from like something quite unlike myself. I'm really big on like having design elements, like really strong design elements in my poetry, just because I think people communicate in many different ways, and visually is really one way to like communicate a message, and like having strong visuals, especially if you look at like a poet like Saul Williams, whose books are just so like you open a Saul Williams book and you're from the moment one. In fact, my books aren't even exciting. He's from moment one. It's like you can have one word on a whole page, and that's all you're getting. And like one word in bold with colors. Anyway, so I'm really inspired by like doing more and more of that with my work, and even with more work as I go forward. And so what I do sometimes after I've written the script, I leave like notes for designers. I like this to look like this, like this to like this. And obviously designers are creators of their own, right? So if they are free to follow my notes or do what they want, like I'm just trying to
Guide
be
them
useful.
on
Yeah.
where your thoughts are. Okay.
And so for this, and I'm going to something. Sorry, I know I've taken the long way around. But for this, I wrote notes, and for Splash, I was just thinking Rosie could just put Splash right in big letters, and I was like, that's gonna be nice.
Yes,
And then
we're actually coming
on
to
page
that
on page 57, right?
Okay.
And then and so now we're reading through these things, and then Rosie does this,
Yes,
right?
we have that.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see this, but she does this like whole hand, like kind of like holding out
Emerging from
from water. And if you read the book till there, it's such a poignant pause in the work, because this image isn't just letters in bold, right? It conveys the desperateness and the like gasping for air, because you see someone drowning and like that, immediately even you feel your breath, you feel like, hey, even me, I'm drowning. And like that emotion, I could never have thought, I can't even take credit. It wouldn't have come to my mind,
That's
right?
true.
And for me, that's the
Because your
beauty.
depiction of someone drowning would be totally different
I would
from
have
the way
written a
that
whole paragraph. He was drowning and was grasping for air. You could feel his.
That's
You drew
true.
one picture.
Yeah. And as you're talking about your journey in getting this book published, it just took me back to my process in getting my first book published, and I can tell the intentionality that went into you deciding even on the painting that you'd pick and the artist that you're going to work with, both for the cover and even for the illustrations inside. And I think a lot has changed, because then when I was publishing my book, which was back in 2010, I was still finding myself and my voice as a poet, and so this whole world of getting published was very new to me. Things happen very fast, and when I look back at my book, and I'm like, there's so many things that I've wanted to change, and maybe the cover would have been different and things like that. The illustrations inside would have been different, but I really love this. When I looked at it, and I was like,
Thank
okay,
you.
now I know my second book, which has been in the works for quite a while. Please don't ask me when it's
Taking
coming
notes.
out. But now I'm feeling the pressure. Now I'm feeling the pressure.
Yeah.
Great. So
As you
now
should, by the way, because you want that book.
I know, and I'm just I have written lots of poems, but then I keep looking at them and I'm like, maybe some of these poems don't need to be in the book, and I need more to include. And is that something that you went through?
I mean, yeah, right? Like, in fact, it's a good time to, the worst thing is send me the questions. So, like, it's a good time for me to jump ahead into that thing about the portrait of the coffee cup,
Yes, yes.
which is a feature in the book, because the thing you've said, right? Like, you're still, it's how all artists view their art, right? And in fact, that's a big theme in the book, right? That I was telling when you talk about earlier about like this book has a lot of loss and stuff in it. It's not just loss. I think it's easy to read this book and be like, oh, it's love, yeah, duh. But
Yeah,
like
but
it's
but that would
there's
be
more.
oversimplification
Exactly, right?
of what the
Of
book,
what it's
some
about,
of
right?
the themes that are
There's
in the
more to it.
book.
And for me, that loss, especially in the artist's journey, right? Like, in fact, I'm just going to say exactly what I said earlier. Most of us poets, you try to write the pain away. And you write and write and write, and you think, okay, now when the world gives me validation for this stuff I've written, the pain will go away, right? Because now they will have deemed me valuable. And you struggle to get to that point, and you get there, and it hurts more than ever, right? It's not even less, it's more. And
Yes, this.
and
Sorry, just
yeah,
continue. There's
and
something that
that
you said, but
yeah,
just continue.
and that insecurity that
Yes.
even as you're saying, looking at the book, is this what should this stay, should this go? It's maddening. And when you talk about that, in fact, this is the lyrics out it, right? A lot of artists struggle with that. And even Lupe Fiasco, in his song "If My Phone Stops Being a Phone" from 1961, in his song "Till I Get There," there's
I
a
almost
verse
said kick push because I'm a huge fan of Lupe
of
Fiasco.
Lupe. No, yeah. But this is particularly about this thing, right?
All
In a
right.
song called "Till You Get," there's a verse where he goes, "Doctor, doctor, please, the fame ain't painless enough." And then the guy responds, That's cause you ain't famous enough. You got a little game, but your name ain't ringing enough." He said, "Take two of these and put change in my cup." And then Lupe is like, "I said I wasn't poor. He prescribed me a publicist and pointed to the door." You know, out.
Whoa.
Ouch. I'm
Yes.
telling you all this from my therapist's couch. Like, and he goes on and says something like, prescribed me an interview and then told me to bounce.
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like that's the same, almost the
The
exact same
same
story of the coffee, of
struggle to
the
go
stain,
through.
on the
Yeah.
coffee cup, right? Like, we're trying to, and of course, when you be yourself, express yourself, and people who like you, or people, I guess, who are hurting like you, or free like you, or experiencing whatever you're experiencing, will find you, because you're not. That's what's that thing Neil Hilborn says. This is not to say that you aren't special. This is to say, thank God you aren't special. So of course, in the more authentic of your expression, you will find people. But as you're expressing yourself authentically, something gets lost there in the middle. You get what I'm saying? Like, something gets lost.
Yeah, but okay, there's something that you were saying, and it really struck a chord with me, because I think the reason why I have been not very keen to get my second book out is because the poems already did their work. And I don't know if that is something that, different forms of art, different types of artists go through. But for me, that process of writing that poem is the therapy that I'm seeking to get me through a certain experience and a certain kind of pain or a certain kind of joy, because we write from a very, place whether you're
Personal place,
experiencing,
yeah.
yes, from a very personal space. But then for me, once that poem is out, it has done its job. It's like you were prescribed for medicine you've taken, and so you don't feel the need to now go tell the world, look at me, I'm healed. So for me, having the book out is sort of secondary, and I think that's something that I've been struggling with, because I'm like, maybe not all my poetry needs to be public
Read by the world.
or read by the world, because some of it, I was going through a very dark phase in my life, and there's usually, of course, the element of people wanting to read more into what you've gone through and thinking that you're still going through the same experience, and not realizing that you already healed from it. So, and I don't know if that's something that you've gone through.
I have lots of
And
things to say to that. So, I think of it like a fire, right? So you light a fire at night. When you light a fire, let's say you've gone camping. Let's make this super hypothetical. You've gone camping and no one was smart enough to light a fire. So you've sat somewhere and lit a fire just for yourself. What happens is people slowly start gravitating towards you, sitting around that fire. And then, sorry. And then the fire goes out, obviously, or like you run out of fuel or whatever. And then people leave, right? And I think poetry is like a fire, which is to say that there's obviously that doubt, but what happens then? So November I published my book. December, January, my friend texted me, a friend of mine, who I actually hadn't spoken to for a while, and he said, "Michael, thank you for writing this book. This book gave me so much clarity." So he wrote this like super like emotional text I wasn't even ready for, and I was like, "Wow, thanks, I guess." But it felt good, right? It felt good to have touched someone's life, and so that for me is the counter thought to maybe I should not put this out there. There's also the fact that maybe you should, and you never know, right? Because not
Yeah.
everyone writes poetry, not everyone, but everyone needs, like Robin
And
Williams, everyone
and
needs poetry. We all
and
need
not everyone
love.
is able to articulate themselves in the way that you do, and the way that you're able to play with words to either, using either analogy or metaphors or whichever other stylistic devices that you use to talk about a certain experience that people don't want to plainly talk about. So
Yeah.
I totally get you
To reach a
now.
concept exactly, inexactly.
Yes, yes. Now, this is your third book,
Yeah.
and the first book was something quite unlike myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a second book which is Time, right? Okay, so when you look at those three books that you've written, how would you characterize your growth in the journey of a reader who writes? And in the different themes that you've explored, where you're at currently, and the themes that you're dealing with right now, compared to the themes and where your mind was when you were writing the first book.
Okay. So here's how I'm going to attack that question. When I wrote my first book, I was told write a book of poetry. I wrote a book of poetry. The best way I knew how. Received its criticism, received its praise, whatever. But it worked, right? It worked in the sense of like people knew about me. My career was growing. I was going on and getting better and better. When I wrote but there was something that rang untrue about it, just to me, not about the book. The book was very authentic, but about the experience. I felt like I still haven't written anything that's added value in that real sense to the canon in the way I wanted to do. Because I really want to like, even if you talk about one of the things we laughed about, how like the poems don't have titles, right? I'm really trying to change imaginations of how we approach poetry and how we think about poetry, because I think that curiosity is key, and kind of sparking and keeping curiosity alive is very important. And books, tools of learning, tools of education should be doing things like that, right? Should be trying to keep the mind active, trying to keep the mind guessing, keep the mind questioning, trying to give the mind more questions. And that's what I'm trying to do. And so I feel like I was always trying to do that, but I didn't have the clarity. I didn't see it with the clarity with which I see it now, where after writing for more than 10 years, I can look at a sentence and be like, actually, no, this is like even this book, like, because I have this book I wrote, I have another book, I have like, I'm still writing. And even with this book, I look at it and I'm like, actually, you should have cut this different. You should have put this poem in front of this poem. You should have, done this, should have pushed here a bit harder. And so I think the real change for me and the real growth is really, I like how my experience, not just in writing poetry, but because obviously, as you know, in this Nairobi, you have to do a lot more and you used to have to like make money and try and figure that out. So my experience in writing in the field in general, I've worked with corporates, I've worked with filmmakers, I've worked with people who do radio, I've worked with people who do newspapers. All that is really sharpening and helping me hone my craft. And obviously, I'm bringing all that back in here, right? So you best believe that in my next book and the book after that, there's going to be more of of the world inside the book, because Jack Spicer asked that question. As a poet, we're not trying to make. I'm trying to make something in my world correlate to something in your world. I'm trying to make my pencil look like your pen, or like my book look like your TV. Like I'm trying to show you something near you within your realm of understanding, but still show you something without your realm of understanding. And so and so all these tools are really nice. Like I really like what I'm learning using the tools of advertising, using the tools of filmmaking, using the tools of documentary script writing. Whatever I'm doing, I'm just learning and absorbing. Like strategy, because like they're all just languages, and then bringing that back into the book, back into the work, and saying how do we use these modern ways, modern tools of like communicating, and not even just communicating, of understanding the world, right? Because we really underrate the mundane, but 40 hours a week, a large chunk of our population is working, right? Looking at these forms, reading these forms of writing, being trained in their brains to understand information presented to them in these certain ways. So I'm really trying to integrate those things and like see how do we mess them about? How do we have fun with them? How do we change form? How do we? These are. I could talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
This is where I play.
And I mean, there's always the thinking that, poetry is a very niche art form, and in today's world, we're not seeing how it's correlating with with the rest of society. How are you able to use your poetry skills in writing in the commercial world? How do you
Okay.
see the two?
Two things. First of all, poetry is the language of life. Thank you. It's not a niche art form. And if you think it's a niche art form, think about all the things that are topping any musical chart, any cinematic chart, anything, and you'll find it's all poetry. It's all about how it's been written and how it's been presented. Like, let's not even talk about like rap music. Let's not talk about like even like scripts. Like if you watched, it was people criticized it, but if you watched Marie, Malcolm and Marie, is that what it's called? This film, Denzel's kid. But the poetry of the language and how it played, that was definitely, you could see in the dialogue. And so poetry is the language of life. This is my point. It's not a niche art form. It's just people don't understand how integrated poetry is in their life because they don't read poetry books. Just because some of us deal with the source code doesn't mean that it's not running through the veins of the system.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the operating system where the
Yeah.
world plugs in their different programs.
Don't,
Okay. Okay.
don't get it wrong.
Yeah.
How do I use it in the commercial? I use it a lot, right? Like I've spent more time than most looking at sentences and organizing them, and I'm grateful that that's a tradable skill on the market, right? I work as a writer. I help people edit. I currently actually have a pretty okay job at a behavioral economics center where like I help them build communication strategies and I help them do all their writing and put all their writing out there.
And I'm guessing now copywriting now becomes very easy because that's basically you finding creative ways of putting words together.
Yeah,
But for a commercial
in fact,
purpose.
it's almost too easy, right?
Yeah,
That's why you
like
have
I'm
to keep.
getting paid for what I love doing.
Yeah, that's why you have to keep writing poetry because
Yes.
you have to sharpen yourself. So
That's true.
I don't believe in like separateness, and I don't believe in things. You know, like how people say this is different, these are different things. I believe that everything
Yeah,
is in one
it's
box and everything is
interconnected.
the same thing. So I try to align my life with all the aspects, like whatever I'm writing in my work, whatever I'm doing in my work, whatever I'm doing at job, what I mean by job work and my work as a writer, all of these things align and all of these things are integrated. Just because you don't live separate lives, you're not a different person on the weekend. You're the same
You're the same
person.
person, just
Yeah.
playing different roles. No, the reason I'm asking is because, I resonate a lot with that because I always look at poetry. It was my launch pad into the work that I have done as a digital marketer, the work that I have done as a content strategist, going into the PR world. It was just from that writing and being able to have that confidence with words and knowing how to shape them, how to use them to tell a story. It's the same fundamentals, but then you find that you're able to apply them in the commercial world and in the corporate space in the way that they are looking at it from a value perspective, so that now you get all these fancy titles of PR and communications manager, but at the end of it, it's all about the kind of
It's all
poetry and
about it, yeah.
and your appreciation of words and how they come together to tell a story. Now, there's a poem that I'd like to read from your book, and I'd like us to talk about it. I set myself ablaze for you, only for you to be disappointed by the ashes. As if fire does not consume, as if the only thing that matters is that your arms stay warm in this cold night. As I sputter and cough out the last of my energy, you poke, prod, sigh, wear your gloves, and go in search of fire. The night is still long. Who can blame you? I found that poem to be really, really powerful. And I don't know, because maybe it's, there's also the element of that it's a cold season. And so it resonated a lot with everything that is going on. I think this is one of the coldest months that we've had in a while.
In a long time.
In a really long
it's
time.
Not nice, it's not polite.
And so this, as I was reading this poem, and not just the shallow meaning from it, but it's a deeper meaning. So I'd like you to talk about, what is this poem about, and where was your headspace when you were writing it?
It's an interesting poem to read. I didn't think you'd read that one. Well, it's I said it, right? I literally just talked about that poem just now, like just 2 seconds ago, when I was saying poetry is like a fire, right? I set myself ablaze for you. Like we do a lot. We do a lot. We do a lot. All of us in our lives. We always do so much, right? And sometimes we expect a lot in return, which is not fair. And I think that when I was talking about that poem, I was reading about that when I was writing that poem. I was actually just trying to capture that aspect of like. And I think even the next poem, tell me if I'm wrong, because it's off the top of my head, but the next poem starts talking about sacrifice, right?
Yes, it's on. It's about forgiveness, understanding, and
What's the first line in that poem?
it's you will begin to forgive
You'll begin to forgive it when you understand
the many ways in which the world has killed those who try to survive it.
Okay, yes, because that's in the same area. It wasn't the poem I thought it was, but it's the same area. Because like the next thing, right, is after you've done all these things, you realize it's your own fault, right? You do a lot, you do a lot, you do a lot. But who asked you to do a lot? You know, people might have been grateful of the fruits of your labor, but even that gratitude is a grace. You're not entitled to it. And so, and I think that's where that poem ends, right? It's like you find yourself left with all this stuff you've done, And, poetry is a fire. You light your fire, people come and they gather and they feel warm, but the fire dies down if it's not fueled. And if it's the people you are looking for, people will go if there's no fire, because people haven't come for you, people have come for the warmth.
That's true.
And so
That's true.
it's about loss in many ways, in the ways that we lose, things, and in the ways, particularly in how we also manufacture our own loss. In the losing of things, we lose ourselves, which causes us to lose things more.
Okay, great. So now that we've really talked about this book, and I'm sure our listeners and our, those who are watching are curious, can they get this book? So, where I know I got my copy from
From
you.
me.
So,
Okay, so me, I have them. DRR has them. DRR is Down River Road. They're the guys who published the book. They have copies. You can check out their page. They have like social media pages and stuff. They do really good stuff. They actually recently did issue 3, which has a compilation of like so many different writers. And they also have that. They have a lot of interesting stuff there. So Down River Road has it, and they have it in different places, and they obviously deliver it wherever you want. I also do deliveries, so you just have to reach out to anyone on the internet between Down River Road and myself, and we'll make sure the book gets to you. If you want to do pick up and drop off, I think Down River Road also has some sites. But yeah, that's how to find the book right now. We're trying to get into more bookshops for the global audience. We're trying to get it worldwide. We had a kind of a bit of a spiff with Amazon because they refused to give us data if we sold our books on their platform, and we didn't think that was fair. So we're trying to get collaborations with more sellers internationally, and obviously trying to infrastructure. Chief Nyamwea was here. I don't have to talk about infrastructure. Chief Nyamwea talks about infrastructure all the time.
Yeah.
We're trying to we're trying to do that. We're trying to build the infrastructure and make it work.
Okay. Great. So as we come to the end of our, very interesting discussion, so this one is just, to ask, who are you currently reading? Which writers, poets, things, people inspire you?
That's the end. You've asked me, who am I reading? Which writers, poets, people, things. Are we doing another podcast?
I know, because it's a mouthful, yeah?
That's a
So let's
lot.
start. Who are you currently reading?
Sam Hepburn.
Which book are you currently reading?
I'm reading 2 books. I'm reading Sam Hepburn, If You Are Me. It's like some teen fiction book about some kid in Afghanistan. I'm only on like page 10, 12, so I really don't know what's going on. But like, I really love teen fiction. Like, I think like if I ever once I'm done writing poetry, I'm definitely gonna write teen fiction, because I really like I as an adult really consume a lot of teen fiction, and I think it's a beautiful genre of work. Because like when you're writing for teens, they're like adults, but they're kids. So you have to write a complicated story enough to like capture an adult's mind, but it has to be simple enough to entertain a child. So it's a really fun space to play in.
Okay.
But the more serious side of me is reading why nations fail. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's also fun. And
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So I'll tell you what I'm currently reading
What are
for
you
the
currently
second time. And this has sort of become like an obsession. So for the second time, I am reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And apart from reading, so this is the second time I'm reading it, because it's a really, I don't know if you read the book. It's a really heavy book. It's about...
I know Eckhart Tolle.
Yes. So I think it was his first book. I know it was published a while back, but I stumbled upon it. And then now when I finished reading the first time, I looked for the audiobook. So now I'm listening to the audiobook and reading, because it has really heavy themes that it deals with, the power of connectedness, the being in the present moment, which is something that I think for a lot of people, and also for me as a writer, I struggled with last year. Just that thing of just being present, because we got to a point where every one of us had to be worried about, the future is uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or what is going to happen in another year or so. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. And so that I found the book to sort of give a lot of clarity on just being present. And mindful thinking. So
you know who's really good for that, actually? Because I watched a panel once, and Eckhart Tolle was there, and this other guy who I really liked called Ram Dass. So Ram Dass has some really good podcasts, really good. these like long, like this like 2-hour YouTube videos and stuff like that. And it's all about that, like about connectedness, about being in the present, about like how what does now look like what
Yes.
and how do we hold ourselves in the moment of now. And you're right, like last year was madness.
It was.
And we're only just like beginning to understand and
Yep.
comprehend and
Yep.
like
Yep.
unravel and see how the world has changed.
And so, I mean, I've found that we sort of need to be reminded that the process is more important than the destination, which is what a lot of us have now become set on, that I need to know what's going to happen tomorrow. I need to plan for it. I need to anticipate. And what the book talks about is just don't worry about tomorrow or the next minute. Live for now. This is the moment that you're actually living that really matters. Yes. So, Michael, it's been great having you on the
Thank
show.
you. It's been great being here.
Thank you for the great work that you have done, continue writing. I'm sure we will be meeting out there again on the different poetry spaces. And great. So to our listeners and our viewers, I hope that this episode has been has been of value to you. Talk to me. I'd love to hear your feedback at Kenyan Poet across the different social platforms. So until the next episode, kwaheri.
Bye.